At this point,
Watching the Dungeon Master,
whose lives depend on multiple distinct domains, like, for
subscribe.
example, a wine merchant with a family
And we're gonna
who
play with
ships
Baldur's
wine overseas. They might need gods with authority over the harvest, over commerce, over the family, over seas, and good weather. But for everyone else, following a charismatic cult will often be good enough. And maybe, just maybe, every so often, they could throw in a veneration for a god of good weather, good fortune, or a god of family. The final piece to the polytheistic puzzle is a feature present in every major polytheistic region throughout human history, but which fails to make an appearance in enough fantasy literature. The little guys. See, unless your fantasy world is created by some sort of world-building masochist, it can't come close to the variety and scope present in real-world polytheistic faith. There are, quite literally, countless gods. Some of the most famous but lesser known gods are gods of entryways, doors, and hinges.
If that's your wish, I'll not shirk the responsibility.
Separate
I have no
deities
particular
in the
desire
Roman
for the position.
But
You
this
have
is
obviously
really
given
just
considerable thought to the future of this group.
Specific
I accept the
families had their
charge,
own
gladly.
deities or guardian spirits. Specific landscape features had their own gods or spirits, as did all manner
What is
of
it now?
mundane objects
Very well.
and mundane processes. Heck, even people can be gods. The Greek demigods had cultic power, and Roman emperors were deified upon their death. Even people just from mythology can become gods, from Sundukon to Gilgamesh. My point is that most worlds simply can't afford the effort it takes to flesh out
Go get the Knights
polytheistic system, as
on
to
the
do
planet
so
sphere
to generate
raid.
a grand, vast tapestry of all of these hundreds and hundreds of little guys, or at least make it feel like you've done that. Pratchett does the latter suggestion well. Sure, he has a lot of work across the million Discworld books to build up all of these niche, intricate little Easter eggs, if you'd like. But he does make the world feel rich, with many gods and many traditions. To its credit, D&D, or at least some D&D settings, also involve certain niche deities. Many species have their own divine shepherds, or divine creators, and the Kortora are notable for their power to collectively imagine their own deities into existence, leading to myriad extant minor curiosities. And that's rather the point. To build a solid polytheistic fantasy system,
You must gather your
can't
party
believe
before
either
venturing forth.
a collection of world builders working tirelessly in the same space,
I'm
or
certainly out of
a
sight.
mind capable of storing all of the
With all
myriad
speed,
bizarre
comrade.
lore and realities and facts of life in your world, while keeping that in mind enough to allow you to make stuff up
Greetings.
as you go along that doesn't contradict something that already exists. And regrettably, if a fantasy tale isn't
certain I'm out of
about
sight.
gods,
None will see me now.
faith, or polytheism, that work
I
probably
trust you are
shouldn't
here
be
in
done.
good faith.
So what is fantasy polytheism? Well, it's a system where heroes and priests of high enough power and magic can grant the often minor requests, needs, and hopes that regular people have for their gods. But also
I welcome you with
gods are not
outstretched
just present
hand.
parts of the world, but active agents with demonstrable
As you go home,
favour
group of Solamic
and
Knights, they're
power
taking this plane.
and curses. In this framework, minor gods and household helpers, as
Heard of such people
brownies
with
and
visions of
hobgoblins
hell
once
before.
were in British folklore,
I didn't know how
are
they
left
would be
by
sent
the
home,
wayside
but
or
it's true
transformed
they would
from
be honored guests.
hopeful
Have them
explanations
count
of
us to give them lodgings,
good
which
luck
you will
and good
strive
fortune
against.
into
If
real,
they're not their own way, they can do their
fantastical
work here.
beasts
Good.
and monsters.
Thank
and
you.
often worlds
Though
where the
they would
gods
rather go
don't
home.
even need
Good day.
to be helpful in their domains or authorities for people to worship because they exist. And so folks simply need to have a reason to fear, respect, or venerate them. I guess fear could be considered an offering of sorts.
I welcome
In
you
short,
with outstretched
it's a
hand.
lopsided
Good word, huh?
pantheon, tinged with an even stronger sense of
I
the
look at you.
charismatic cult,
Oh,
while
that is wonderful. What do you
deities
have,
can
a
exist
mattress
entirely
to scrub?
independent of the populace's
And then yesterday.
need to venerate them. Here, gods are not
Charlie Reed also
created
mentioned
to
the
fulfill a
right?
specific need,
Are you
function,
ready,
or
Reggie?
domain. In many fantasy cases, it's the other way round. That's not polytheism, at least as we know it. I don't know what to call it. Maybe it's a form of charismatic henotheism. But either way, it's a unique feature of fantasy. And I find it utterly fascinating that fantasy polytheism is simply not like anything we have in our world. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed that deep dive into a rather complex and full topic. If you have, or you have any thoughts on this matter, please do let me know in the comments. I really enjoy talking about some of these more thoroughly complex issues within fantasy. And if you have any suggestions for what sort of thing I should talk about next, please also get down in the comments. And subscribe if you want to see more videos in this vein. But for now,
Certain I'm out of sight.
thank you so much for
None
watching.
will see me now.
I have been Tom, otherwise known as the Dungeon Master, and see you in the next video. I am overrepresented in fantasy. Not
You must
just
gather your party
because I'm a
before
white
venturing
dude,
forth.
but also because I'm a human.
For honor
Humans
and
are
glory!
so often the focus of our fantasy
May the
stories.
gods look
Their
upon you
points of view
kindly.
are privileged, and
You have my
for
greetings,
some
faithful one.
unknown reason, nearly
chance of
every
seeing me
fantasy
now.
world has some sort of human majority. But compared to elves and dwarves, we're powerless, unimpressive, and weak. Should humans even exist at all in a world
Helm
filled
guides my
with
path.
other fantastical species?
Let's free those poor Islamic knights.
No chance of seeing me
First,
now.
let's look at
Spend a
some
few days
common
with the,
arguments given in the fantasy
spear.
community. Usually, people suggest
Liberate.
that humans are such excellent generalists, so creatively potent or so good at making babies that we dominate even the most wild and most strange
chance of seeing
fantasy
me now.
worlds.
¡Arigato!
Let's investigate these in reverse order.
¡Tráete un arroz con
Start with a
gatos!
station period of 9 months.
No les des croquetas todavía, ponlas en el horno, viejo. Come espagueti y descansa.
Compare that to standard presentations of goblins, or even fantasy creatures who use eggs or
No
sperm
chance of seeing
to
me now.
create children, and humans are relatively slow and inefficient. When lizard folks or frog people can create dozens or hundreds of offspring at once, humans don't really have so much of a competitive advantage here. Perhaps we do beat out the traditionally very slow elven baby-making process, but when it comes to technical skill or creative potential, we are again surpassed. In most fantasy worlds, dwarven and elvish creations are simply superior to the greatest human efforts. This makes sense. Their civilizations are usually presented as older
The best
and
leaders
more
also
stable,
follow.
and dwarven forging or elven magics are legendary. Let's be honest, any great master of their craft being able to survive for a few hundred extra years is gonna do an awful lot for our lifetime output, and might even make for greater skill ceilings available than in a single human lifetime. But Tom, you say, the human capacity for ingenuity and creative problem solving is unsurpassed. Really? I mean, yeah, on Earth, we are probably the first and only creature to make tools that have the sole purpose
Someplace
of making it
livable.
easier to make. We have achieved some wondrous things, but in a fantasy world without a strong magic, we may end up with stunted, even in the imagination creativity regard. While gnomes are often seen as very tech-savvy folks, fully on board the creative inventiveness train, the civilizations of elves and dwarves have likely already done much of what makes human achievement interesting
I'm out of sight.
by the time we get our first farm going. But that's not fair. I've been comparing humans to other species where they're strongest. It doesn't matter if the average orc is stronger than the average man.
Yes?
That kobolds are far more numerous than we are.
Faster than Tick Tick and Fast Paws.
Strength is generalism.
I'm certain
What?
I'm out of sight.
A sound suggestion.
How are you?
Well enough. We can take a hit better than a wispy elf, jump higher and make more complex machines than goblin folk, and strategically outmaneuver an orcish horde in the field. How useful is this, though? When dealing with sapient creatures, especially in land disputes and tribalistic conflicts, each side seeks because they're not stupid.
As shall go,
because they
it
don't
shall
want
be
to
done,
lose
and
or
done well.
die. So the orcs will raid. Goblins swarm with their fills those with arrows from afar, and dwarves won't compete in instead of all-out war. If your foes are intelligent, they will exploit their strengths.
Foul magic
and
is drawn to
your
these pits like
weaknesses.
flies.
And ultimately, in such a
Certain I'm out of
situation,
sight.
humans
None will see me
just
now.
don't have that many impressive strengths to leverage. But humans do have strengths. We aren't perfect. We are creatures and shaping the natural world to suit our needs. We are deeply ambitious and have one clear physical advantage over every other creature in a fantasy world. We are pretty much the best long-distance endurance runners in existence. I'm serious. A human can outrun a horse, a lion, and a cheetah at a long enough
Point the
distance.
sword. I shall fight. Very well.
Orcs are too naturally dwarves too short. Elves too light. At this one specific thing. Before we get into exploring in most worlds, there's one other way that humans are generally demonstrated as being rather special. We are
Only because you asked
delicately,
nicely.
probably the most biologic of all of the fine fantasy folk. Of course, this is like disguised, but it is a ubiquitous enough point of fact that it merits
Certain I'm out of
inclusion.
sight.
I imagine most of your reasoning, if there is any, is that humans are so basic.
I hear you.
Likely to go wrong, leading many fantasy worlds
No chance of seeing me now.
I'm
semi-humans
certain I'm out of sight.
or
None will see me now.
half some things. So with all this,
And amongst the regulars, I shall remain.
world, not living in mountains, cave systems, or deep in verdant forests, but rather thriving on vast savannas and plains. An
None will
environment
see me
where
now.
threats can be seen approaching, where a semi-nomadic lifestyle is possible, and where our endurance running capabilities are on full display. Yes, in our own world we've adapted to hunt,
chance of seeing me
thrive,
now.
and
I'm certain I'm out of
survive in
sight.
so many
None
other
will see me
environments. But with the elves in the forests, dwarves in the mountains, and the threat ever-present of orcs and goblins, humans would likely be rather hemmed into this plain savannah niche. After all,
Must gather
so
your
we
party
likely
before
have a
venturing
collection of
certain amount of
tribes
sight.
operating across a
None will see me
vast
now.
plain, most likely warring in amongst themselves, but rallying together to keep the plains and its creatures safe from outsiders. As persistent predators and omnivores, humans chase prey over long ranges while also engaging in agriculture, foraging, and animal husbandry. We can expect human settlements to look originally quite similar
With all
to how
speed,
we
comrade.
usually arrange ourselves in the ancient world, just with less opportunity to roam around or use vast quantities of wood. But what about our rather unique
No chance of seeing me now.
compatibility?
I'm certain I'm
How
out
could
of sight.
humans in this world
see
reasonably
me
develop
now.
past the Iron Age? Well, the trouble with being an elf is that you have a child if you're very dedicated, perhaps every 100 years. With the pace of the world, of wars,
No chance of
plagues,
seeing
and
me now.
I'm certain I'm out of
progress,
sight.
that's an
None will see
awfully
me
long
now.
time. So any hit to an elven population echoes and ripples on a much grander scale than even in our own human history.
never
A
saw much of the
long-lived
cities from the
society
For honor
with
and glory.
a low
All
birth
so
rate
crowded
is
like this?
incredibly vulnerable to population collapse. And if it gets bad enough, they
Hell
may
guides
well
my
need
path.
to introduce humans to the gene pool. Species used to waging vast all-out
chance of
wars
seeing me
with their
now.
entire
certain I'm out of
populace
sight.
on the line,
None will see me
like
now.
orcs, may find themselves in the same boat. They may actually require human genetic material to rebuild their own civilizations after devastating losses. Considering
No chance
this,
of seeing
it
me
is
now.
likely
certain
that
I'm out of
humans,
sight.
as time
None will see
goes
me
on,
now.
may become a minority diasporic population
however I
among the
can.
societies of many different species. Having a human around is useful. After all, they don't have remarkably tough carapaces, supernatural strength, wings, or magic in any exceptional sense, so they make wonderfully non-threatening servants. It's likely that they may even be bought and sold as breeding stock, or cheap but intelligent labour, perhaps forming a culture among the human homelands of raiding and selling neighbouring tribes off to the elves or whoever's buying. In the absence of powerful communications magic or technology,
leaders
especially
also follow.
in low magic worlds, humans would serve as pretty much the best messengers. They have enough sense
No
to avoid
chance of
danger
seeing me
along the
now.
way, while
certain I'm
also
out of
being
sight.
the best endurance
shall be
animals
done
See me now.
on the
and done
planet.
well.
Far better than, say, a bird who can only take a pre-written message, not
Greetings,
one
good customer.
delivered
A
with
pearl to you?
subtle voice and the nuances of pleasantries, and far less likely at risk from the dangerous denizens of the world. With all this said, I envision the human lands
I'm certain I'm out of
developing
sight.
to have pockets
None will
of
see me now.
well-fortified cities, most likely made of stone, surrounded by tribal satellite villages. Those few tribes who gain massive wealth exploiting their fellow humans build these cities that become crossroads and melting
chance of
pots of
seeing me now.
travellers,
I'm certain I'm out of
merchants,
sight.
and
None will see me
messengers.
now.
These stone cities serve as relay points in the exchange of information.
At your order.
worldwide.
What is it now?
Perhaps the human
Very
trade
well.
of choice becomes information, synthesizing the achievements of those other species who let them in
I'm certain I'm
and
out of sight.
made them work,
None will see me
enabling the fusion of cultures. who themselves refuse to collaborate. Humans, being non-threatening, become mediators, diplomats, all the while sending their new discoveries and
No chance of seeing me now.
I'm still
back
here.
home.
You've
After
thought
all,
this through.
even if the dwarves have now built a nice little human
I'm certain I'm out of
district,
sight.
it doesn't
None will
stop
see
can
me
I do?
the
now.
fact being true that the original human
I'll do
minority
it.
was captured and put to work, labouring or to fix
chance of seeing me
population problems. Seen as this unthreatening, unrevolutionary weakling
I'm certain I'm out of
species.
sight.
We
None will
have
see me
plenty
now.
of historical examples in our own world of the long-term problems, ethically and socially, in trying to keep other humans under lock and key, punished, and forcing them to work. Now imagine that it's not humans
No chance of seeing
committing
me now.
generational horrific violence against our fellow man,
I shall go
but
forth at your
those
command.
I'm
so-called
certain I'm out of sight.
advanced
None will see
species.
me now.
For the first time in fantasy or real history, it may be that humans all share a common
No
goal,
chance of
a
seeing me
common
now.
enemy. Everyone else. After all, even though these diasporic communities are
certain I'm
now
out of sight.
free,
None will see me
that
now.
doesn't mean humans aren't doing the dirty work. Except humans are carrying the messages of these civilizations.
Yes?
The human cities of the plains
No chance of
are
seeing me
neutral
now.
ground where disagreements amongst these grand ancient civilizations are put
I'm certain I'm
to
out of
rest.
sight.
In fact,
None will see me
slowly
now.
but surely, humans have made their way to a point of some importance in the world's political landscape. They have some familiarity with most cultures due to the problems that come from being so compatible, and they've established enclaves in cities throughout the world. And, to boot, they've proven themselves capable of discretion and resourcefulness. As long as humans can remain useful to the species who require them around as insurance, I believe that their unassuming, non-threatening, non-specialized existence makes them great in just one more thing.
No chance of seeing me now.
In a world transitioning towards global communications, trade, and the integration of technology,
certain I'm out of
magic,
sight.
and all
None will see me
species,
now.
humans' generalized skill set, and in this
Yes?
case, their experience under the boot of different creatures around the world, sets them up to adapt better than anyone to change. As the elven forests show signs of shrinking, as the mithril veins die out, as goblin warfare struggles more and more with great stone walls and siege defences, the time of humans might dawn. They're still a minority in most other species' lands, but the plains becomes this melting pot of ideas. Human cities are the most forward-looking of them all, and as technological progress runs away with civilization, the ones who can keep up are likely those kept down for so long. In summary, I don't actually think that we should be avoiding using humans in our... They can serve to make fiction more relatable, comprehensible, and better show contrast. But I do find that assumption that humans are somehow the majority
Greetings,
of
citizens.
fantasy
I trust you'll be
citizens
keeping your
at any
weapons
point
at your sides.
just a little bit ludicrous. We're simply not good enough to compete with most other fantasy species in a fair or unfair fight. My recommendation would be towards eliminating any assumption you might have about this human baseline, this human majority, in a fantasy world that includes any other species. And to consider more what space you want humans to have in your world building.
disgustingly
After all,
sick
we're
person out there.
constantly
I
debating
simply
and
don't have the
interrogating
manpower
what
to
hobbits
protect
or
everyone.
halflings or elves stand for, what function they serve in our fantasy tales. We always ask, Should I include dragons? Giants? Will they make my world ridiculous or unbelievable? Why not do at least that courtesy for humans too? They certainly don't need to be there. And some works of
Point the sword with
fantasy
all speed,
would
comrade.
simply be better if they
I'll
were.
trade you a few words, sure enough.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into what exactly the point of us is. If you want some videos discussing what actually a fantasy person is, please do let me know, because I think that sounds like an interesting concept. And if there's any other video ideas that you have, please let me know what you'd like me to talk about in the comments, and subscribe to the channel, please. But with all that said, I've been Tom, otherwise known as the Grungeon Master, and I will see you in the next video. What is a cult? Not a question we tend to ask ourselves while world building. After all, we're all kind of on the same page. A cult is a group of weird people who believe in something pretty strange and often exhibit some dangerous or unusual behaviours, right? Well,
No
no.
chance of seeing me now.
Turns out, among the community that studies religions, cult is a word almost never used.
I'm certainly
Are
out
you
of sight.
interested in some
Very nearly
None will see me
nothing,
now.
and has a lot
You
of
will
baggage
suffer.
attached.
Oh, yeah.
I want to dive into that baggage to figure out why we're so obsessed with putting cults all over. This video will be discussing modern cults and some as well as touching on brainwashing and deprogramming. Just so you're aware. What we sometimes call a cult is often called a new religious movement.
I hear you
in
well
modern
enough. For
studies.
honor and
Funny
glory.
enough, there are very few movements.
A good hit.
Honor and title.
I stand amongst them, the light shall prevail.
Truth or practice. But if they're entirely new, this means
Not I.
challenging established norms or beliefs of wider society that they spring from. NRMs also often require a kind of strict social order among their members, often manifesting as some sort of communal living or of financial control.
I am the
even
predator
down
that
to
lives amongst
arranging
you.
relationships and births around the group's goals. Finally, and most critically for our discussion today, there is a leader or a group of significant figures who have authority.
No one was
They
dead.
convince people to follow them, join
At your
that
order.
movement, and abide by their rules. That's the thing. In fantasy, we often see cults
Aye.
depicted as
Something we
organizations devoted to some dread god or demon. But in reality, the movements most often described
What
as
now?
cults have their physical presence.
This is a lot more exciting than any circus.
As
Insurgents.
so where Satan indoctrinating
What is it now?
ritual.
None will see
Sure.
me now.
Helm guides my
Most
path.
NRMs do have a goal. They want to be the best. They want to be saved, and they want to be right. They are hopeful movements,
chance
not
of seeing
built
me
on
now.
some
I'm certain I'm out
despair
of
and
sight.
resignation for the
None will see me
unknown
now.
dread lord they serve, but rather a hope-filled, fervent belief that their doing things right will be vindicating, rewarding, or at least serve them in good
No chance
stead
of seeing me now.
I'm certain I'm
when
out of sight.
things come to a
None
head.
will see me now.
So, this is a group of like-minded people living under the imposed social order of a charismatic leader because they believe they know
I shall go
something
forth, and the best leaders also follow.
others aren't. And here we are.
Point the swords. I shall strike.
In games,
None will
and
see
we're
me
so
now.
very obsessed with them. Much of the modern fantasy industry, gaming and writing, exists from an American perspective. And from the 70s, American popular culture has been awash in a clash between new religious movements, NRMs, and
No chance of seeing me now.
Are you
from the
interested in some
satanic
real
panic
stuff?
which nearly killed D&D in its infancy to
certain
the
I'm out of
rise of
sight.
beliefs in
None will see me now.
deprogramming. Beliefs that members of these
Honourable men are hard to come by.
mentally reprogrammed by their charismatic leaders, the media scrutinizes new religious movements with a distinctive fervor. Of course, this is all in the background of some awful and tragic mass losses of life, often premeditated among some of these fringe groups. But the fact remains that essentially in the US, due to feeding frenzy around these awful and horrific
Whatever there was. Oh, the gods would surely smite man for such
in the process of single worshipping some that will. It's often down to this Christian sense of that anything that is demonic, summoning some dread. But what or even actually wants the soul evil, malevolent entity. New religious movements are, by their name, followers believe that they, community, have the right, but at least they, or have.
I hear you, brother. Shall be done and done.
I'm certain I'm out of sight.
The divine, or even in a fantasy world, tangible benefits on offer, chief among them.
I'm certain I'm out of sight.
Or use magical powers you couldn't before, to stick around in spite of the coercive control they may be exhibiting upon you. Resurrection, for example, is a wonderful boon in those worlds that use it, and in worlds where the heavens are in some way observable, or even with any idea of salvation. Eternal bliss is a pretty good reward. But most fantasy cults end up dedicated to some niche deity, often, strangely, being the only worshippers of said deity, which is not really a cult, but a faith. A cult or new religious movement usually teaches something non-traditional
None will see me now.
a god
Like
or
this one who
faith
has more than
system.
two gold pieces to rub together.
Are you
Worshipping a
interested
god
in some thrills, darling?
like everyone else does, but it's just a weird and niche god. Or, if they're not dedicated to some strange entity, they're almost always seeking to bring about a dramatic event. Often an attempt to free their dread lord from its chains, probably to usher in some new cataclysm. In real life, we have many examples of new religious movements that feel like they can predict apocalypses. It's fewer that think that they can bring them about, and fewer still that think that they're going to be the sole survivors, on Earth at least, after the apocalypse happens. Our apocalyptic new religious movements are usually focused on
Have a look at my
preparing the
wares.
body and
I trust you'll find them all in
end times
satisfactory
to
condition.
come, before they need to either move the goalposts or disband when said end times fail to come. It makes sense that in a fantasy world with more imminent and active deities, these movements may have gods who interact with them much more directly. But if the god or object of worship isn't personally recruiting these followers and taking an active role, then it must in fact be a charismatic, regular enough person leading the cult. In this case, there can be no personal plea deals with the trapped entity or tempting offers from beyond the veil. There is instead a charismatic head of the group who is responsible for keeping everyone on side, with or without their patron's whispering voice in everyone's ears, to achieve the group's goal. All this is to say, there's only really a couple of ways to go against the natural proclivity of people to want some reward for putting in work and making sacrifices. One, by telling them that they
you
were born
interested in some
flawed
plans to
and they need to fix that to make up to it, making it kind of an inverse reward system. And two, actual brainwashing. Sure, if your charismatic leader is actually just enchanting or manipulating their own followers, then any form of self-preservation or hope doesn't actually matter, nor does any form of seemingly just reward. Coercive tactics such as negative reinforcement and separating people from trusted advisors, family,
Very well.
friends also work, but not necessarily to
In
cause
Zaragon's
someone
name
to doom
it
their
shall be
eternal
done.
soul knowingly.
Hello, me good smiling friends.
So, essentially, minor mind-controlling magic may be a very useful tool in a potential cult leader's
No
arsenal,
chance of seeing
but
me
do
now.
be careful
Certain I'm
including
out of
such things
sight.
in your games,
None will see me now.
partly because this is a live, active debate in modern communities
No chance of
about
seeing me
whether
now.
cult joiners are in some way being brainwashed, a process fixable by the plausible deprogramming. Both terms are fraught and filled
I'm
with
certain I'm
some
out of
very
sight.
modern and
see me
fresh
now.
lived experiences.
No chance of seeing me
I
now.
stand amongst the righteous.
Make clear to your audience that such things will be being addressed. So, we have our cult leader,
Did I
who's a
want you?
holder of some counter-cultural truth that they feel people need to observe. We have a group of followers who believe in this message, and we have an object
With all
of
speed,
faith,
comrade.
either a new way of seeing the
certain I'm out of
God,
sight.
or
will see
some
me
new
now.
philosophy about how the world
No
works,
chance of
or
seeing me
the
now.
leader themselves. But our quote-unquote
Oh, your mother
needs
has
to
abandoned thee, sweet
and most
Lydia.
fantasy cult
You have
goals
only one option left. Turn us thou to me, and let us be wed at
uncreative.
last.
So let's borrow some more intriguing
No,
cultic goals from your
Ronaldo.
life.
I cannot.
Let's start with the common
Oh,
doomsday
Rodrigo,
stuff.
Rodrigo,
We've dealt
my fair
broadly
love,
with the fact
where
that
hast thou
prediction,
gone?
purification and preparation are more common goals than bringing
here
about
I am.
the apocalypse yourself.
Here I am, my
Perhaps a group anticipates a draconic
sweetums.
war and stockpiles dragon
Rodrigo,
slaying equipment.
Rodrigo,
Maybe
it
a group
is
kidnaps
thee at
magical
long last.
religious figures
But
and
where?
imprisons them in order to fight
I've
off
been
the upcoming
across the
predicament
sea, my
of
fair,
a dead apocalypse.
my fair one.
Perhaps
Yeah,
they
yeah,
guard
yes, that's
an
it.
object
Across the
that they
sea,
consider to be
and
a gate to the heavens in
that's not the
preparation
actor they had
for the
last
end
time.
times, resolutely
And
certain
perhaps
that they
on the
need
new
to
lands, my
defend
lord?
this gate from
Yes,
the
that's it.
desperate,
On the new land.
only allowing
Yes,
those who have passed their tests. These are all so much more interesting and novel than an attempt to summon the 17th eldritch horror that will inevitably eat them and
Where's the
everything
actor that was here last time?
Self-destructive NRMs also loom large in media
This is
presentations.
terrible!
As
Awful!
disbandings are often quite dramatic.
Is it
Such
Rodrigo?
cults often have a
No, how
purpose
can
of
this be?
sorts,
Well, you should
usually
be.
related
So,
to an established concept
confused?
in a broader faith
baffled.
taken to the extreme. Destruction
Baffled,
is
yes.
often seen
Well,
as
you should look so baffled, my lord.
a response to an
Kironaldo,
unexpected apocalypse,
'twas you
or some
who,
last-ditch
Get him
effort to
off the
offer
stage.
something
who,
to the divine
which that,
object of worship. These groups almost
Arranged for
never
me to be shipped across the
self-destruct
sea.
in a vacuum.
Huh? What's that?
Scrutiny from authorities,
Yes, you are correct,
unpaid
Rodrigo.
debts,
'Twas I that arranged for thy trip across the great ocean.
or
'Twas
feelings of irrelevance
truly fiendish of me,
act as
but how
motivating
did thy ever
factors in
come
these
to return
horrific
so quickly?
situations. For these groups, perhaps the pressure
forget.
felt
I'm
by
just
a
the
kingdom's
understudy.
investigators or
Great.
faith's
I refuse to watch
investigators.
this.
Or
Oh,
simply
great!
the
Boo!
victories getting
Boo!
closer to their
Boo,
hideout
that's awful.
could
Terrible.
be all that is needed
Oh
to
dear.
trigger something tragic and awful. The
I've
very
dollars and
I'm-
dollars in crowds for
I'm
followers
sorry, good
becoming
folk of
this
the audience.
Getting a
model
As you can see,
paid
things are not quite
for
right
power
with our
play.
truth
Moving
due to
away from
circumstances
this, there are
beyond our
also
control.
utopian NRMs, groups which seek to strike out and form a new, better way of living. Either better
I
in
beg of
accordance
you,
with
good
ancient
people,
faith
come back
teachings,
another day
or in a way
when we have
prescribed
restored
as
matters.
better
We shall
by
prove to you then that the sigil truth
authority.
is worthy of your
These are
attention
what
and
are,
coin.
in some ways, the
And we shall do so for
unserious
free,
society.
of
They
course.
try to
And
live
one
according
final
to the
odd
proper
request,
order,
good
seeking some
If
idiom
you
like
or
the
another
Garden of Eden,
knows of those who
or
are skilled in the
other
arts of
things where
sword
perhaps
and
a group of
adventure,
fishermen have
do send
holed
them to
up
speak to me.
in the old
It is a
town,
matter of
ignoring
utmost
the
urgency.
industrialisation
Tell them to come and
around,
speak
or
to
perhaps
I,
a group in some
Rael is shy.
house out in the countryside,
Until
taking
then,
it upon themselves
I
to
apologize
form
again and
a
bid you a fair
naturist,
evening.
barter-based or polygamous
At your
social
order,
economy
for honor
goes
and
against
glory.
See me
the
now.
established normalcy. Similarly, we have reformist new religious movements. These groups don't necessarily seek to create their own personal utopia, but rather to shape the system they exist
You need
in
something?
to their ideals. They operate
All right.
Certain I'm out of
activism
sight.
and protest
None will see
in
me
an
now.
effort to move
I am afraid if you are
forward.
looking
They
for a
can be
refund for
social
tonight's
reform,
performance, I can only tell you to come back when our troop is not in such disarray.
governmental policies, or act on behalf of nature, the climate, for or against industrialization. But a reformist new religious movement seeks to impose its will on wider structures, go beyond the insular and create change. Although our modern perception of these groups is largely secularized, that they are activists or political dissidents, historically and even today, many of these organizations hold religious beliefs as central in their movements, especially in fantasy worlds with immanent active gods. Why on earth would faithful folk not get involved in reformist movements? And they make such great complex villains too, due to this added dimension. As much as the Society of Friends does start out as a reformist new religious movement, so too does the Westboro Baptist Church. Make your religions political, because frankly, throughout most of human history, they have been. Speaking of that last group I mentioned, they are also very good examples for the last types of new religious movement. I like to conceptualize these as inward-looking and outward-looking versions of the same thing. Hate groups. These groups identify by who they aren't, who their enemies are. They can be anyone, from political opponents to professions or even species. The difference between inward-looking and outward-looking hate groups is essentially that the former polices its members and its own community to ensure that all objects or people that anger it are rooted out, shunned, expelled, or harmed, while outward-looking groups are mainly engaged in campaigns to enact political reform on a grand scale, often using terror-like tactics. Perhaps A divine squabble between minor deities patronising two different craft guilds spills into the streets, segregating communities. Or perhaps a certain guild of craftsmen in a dying art form seeks to glorify their work or their deity through revolutionary violent acts kind of like the Luddites. Hate groups of all kinds using this structure make excellent inflection points to demonstrate society's biggest divisions, and can easily lead to division, unsafe settlements, and violence.
What is it now?
Some of the
Hell
biggest
guides my
motivators
path.
in kicking off interesting conflicts in fantasy worlds.
No chance of seeing me now.
The gangs and thugs that show up in fantasy media. It makes them so much
I'm certain I'm out of sight.
interesting when they're
None will see me
actually
now.
backed up or in the name of some deity or inspired
The
by
best
some
leaders
new
also follow.
interpretation of a minor deity's message.
No
Of
chance
course,
of seeing
must
me
gather
now.
your
many
party
cases,
before venturing
hate
forth.
is justified post facto.
The light
But
shall
the very
prevail.
fact that such a group may seem
I'm
to
certain I'm out of
have
sight.
divine favour,
None will see me
especially if
now.
magic is on their side, may give pause or make the situation far more complex. Heck,
I'm
maybe
sorry
some
I'm closed at the moment. Come back when I
is
have
the one
replenished my
pulling the
stock.
strings all along, not to convince the cultists to do evil, but to sully the name of the
You
god
have gathered
they profess
this
their worship
evidence?
to. A holy doctrinal street war between gangs of people venerating the same gods in the same pantheon sounds like the perfect backdrop for some complex fantasy drama to me. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed
It shall be done,
by this
and
dive
done
into
well.
what actually cults or new religious movements are and do, and how we
certain
can
I'm out
make them
of
so
sight.
much more interesting.
Something
than
new.
I can go much deeper.
CEO, the DG, Peto.
Comments and subscribe to the channel if you do want to see
Okay.
more like this. But for now, I've been Tom, otherwise known as the Grindmaster. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see
I
you
shall go forth at your command. Very well.
in many settings that engage in extrapolative world building. We find an individual
Point the
or
sword,
group
and
or
I
a
shall
nation
strike.
that determines that necromancy isn't that bad. It's an excellent labour-saving device. It's basically recycling. It's not like the
Just
dead are
point me
using
in the
their
right
bodies
direction.
for anything in particular, right?
Sure
These are
thing.
all examples of arguments
No chance of
commonly
seeing me
made.
now.
But I think what people often miss in these broad abstractions are the real effects that such policies place on people. So is raising the dead ethical? Or can we make it ethical? Let's figure this out. There are a few questions which are really fundamental to establish answers to for our quest.
certain I'm out of
1.
sight.
Do people have souls? 2. Can these souls be reunited with their bodies? And
No chance of
3.
seeing me now.
Do undead creatures have souls? For every fantasy world, these answers are going to differ drastically. So let's stick with one of the most influential and broad fantasy properties, and one which allows us the full spectrum from resurrection to
certain I'm out of sight.
reanimation.
None will see me
D&D.
now.
So, in a world playing by D&D,
No chance of
the
seeing me
answers
now.
are generally yes. People
I
have
hear you well.
souls. Generally yes. Souls
chance
can
of
be
seeing me
brought
now.
back, hewn back together with bodies. And generally no. Undead are usually not considered ensouled. But there is a fourth very important question. Who knows these things? If our fantasy citizens are working with incomplete data, they may find poor ethics. In the case that a person believed that undead created from a specific type of ritual do actually have their soul returned to them, then reanimation becomes in effect no
Good hit.
of ancestors populace. If an individual
Plant a blade
becomes
in
aware
your
by a
enemy.
trusted authority that
Plant
an
a
afterlife is real, which afterlife their
Something
loved
you
one is
need?
gone, then we
If you
can't
say so.
further. A value judgment must be
Not
made
to
on the
dampen
soul's
anyone's
behalf,
spirits.
whether their thus, in some settings, and not D&D,
The use of the healing arts in your
even
possession. I can hear you well
resurrection
enough.
is sometimes unethical, as it robs a soul of its
I'll help
autonomy
however I
and
can.
chance at bliss or an afterlife at this particular moment. Or alternatively, perhaps resurrection becomes a moral As mentioned earlier, D&D sidesteps this particular project by instituting
Be quick with it.
system by which a creature cannot be revived if it is not.
What do you want, groundling?
So, in this system, we can refuse resurrection.
Skullbreaker! And amongst the righteous.
My God.
Well, creatures like revenants, will-o'-wisps, and ghosts, for instance. In 5th edition, there is currently no way to summon a will-o'-wisp or revenant directly. Literally summoning a ghost spirit.
At your order. With all speed, comrade. From here, you bastard. Do it now!
This is
What is it now?
If you're sure.
because necromancers of
I'm certain I'm out of
sufficient
sight.
I shall go forth at your command for honor and glory.
which have souls, or which are souls. Will-o'-wisps are quite literally described in the monster manual as the souls of evil beings. The common recycling argument is looking a little more shaky, especially because
I'm
ghosts
certain I'm out of
and
sight.
will-o'-wisps are
None will
souls
see me
specifically
now.
divorced from bodies, but both the body and the soul exist in the same plane of existence. In the case of an evil individual who drowns alone in a bog and returns as a wisp, this creature exists as a corpse and a soul in the same
I'm certain
locale,
I'm out
in
of
the
sight.
same very bog.
None will see
Should
me
a
now.
necromancer pull the body out of the bog and invade it with animated spirit, is that a violation of the soul's autonomy or not? It's very, very unclear. One assumes that the created will-o'-wisp would have something to say about that particular
I'm certain I'm out of sight.
violation, although
None will
because
see me
will-o'-wisps
now.
are inherently evil creatures, maybe that's in some way ethically justifiable. I'm not going to even get into the notion of codified evil creatures in this point. But this is all very Christian coded.
I'm
What if
certain
we're
I'm out of
actually
sight.
operating under
None will see me
other
now.
systems or assumptions?
Yeah,
If
be well for this.
Reincarnation.
Point me in the right direction.
Which body
It's
is
done.
which souls? Sure, if someone has moved on to a new form, their old body is just there to
Have
be
you
there.
I'm certain I'm out of sight.
Existing nature. Maybe it is
See at me now.
simple recycling. If we can prove it, D&D does have a spell that reincarnates individuals, and it is my personal favourite.
You must watch your
form
every
of
move in a place such as
resurrection
this.
mechanics
Dark,
in
all
the
magic is
storytelling.
drawn to these
But
pits like
that's
flies.
by the by. Reincarnation opens up this
None
whole
will see me now.
other can of worms. If there's a long and broken chain of bodies that a soul has inhabited over the past, what can we do, or what can't we do with those bodies? Does the soul have a right to them or not?
Point the sword,
is
and
that
I
not
shall
waived
strike. Hell
in
guides
the
my
process
path.
of
No
resurrection,
chance of seeing me
especially
now.
if that resurrection
The best leaders also follow.
by a spellcaster using magic. I think it's about time to discuss the ethics.
It shall
of
be
the
done,
Enlightenment.
and
In our
done
world,
well.
this was a period of extreme change in social mores. Atheism was beginning to become a legitimate philosophical movement,
No
and
chance of seeing me
rationality
now.
and empiricism had
I hear you well enough.
in the minds of the socialized intellectual elites. This was a time for questioning the established order, and the time of the scientific revolution, which sought to describe
Very well.
the physical material
chance of
world
seeing me now.
entirely separate from the world of divinity and spirit. For pretty much the first time. Please feel free to fact check me on that. As such, we get some pretty historically alien ethical systems being developed, most notably utilitarianism.
No chance
This
of seeing me
posits
now.
that the greatest good is served by maximizing good for every person, in essence. Considering animated
Long live the order of the most radiant heart, for I draw from the pool of right and strike
Hello, me
their
good
way.
smiling
use of these
friends.
creatures for the collective good of people may be a morally justifiable
No chance of seeing me now.
utilitarianism. Indeed,
must gather your party
in the
before venturing forth.
hyper-capitalistic modern world, which in many countries assumes faith to be a secondary concern, I can easily
No
envision
chance of seeing me now.
With all
zombie
speed,
workforce
comrade.
properly controlled to be championed as
Hello, me
a
good smiling friends.
labor-saving device. Indeed, if we got over the shock of magic being real, I would not be surprised if the UK eventually legalized undead labor.
You must gather your
as long as
party
they
before
were
venturing forth.
ethically sourced and
For
health
honor
safety
and glory!
compliant. The thing is, many fantasy worlds are not currently undergoing a philosophical enlightenment where the role of faith is unsteady and unstable, in stark contrast to a rising tide of discoveries in the observable dynamics of the material world. Although, to be honest, if there are any fantasy settings like that, I would love to learn about them. Maybe kind of like the late Discworld books, but with more Planescape thrown in. It sounds like a really, really fun time. So please do read if you know of any settings in the throes of this thorny question. Anyway, even putting aside the absurdity of a world with real provable deities undergoing such a movement, let's actually unpack the human problem. Ethics is an abstracted study. It is intended to provide both context and frameworks for dealing with some specific real-world
Hello there.
scenarios. But real life is infinitely complex and
No chance of
messy.
seeing me
Let's
now.
actually interrogate what ethically sourced and
I
healthy
stand
and
amongst the
safe
righteous.
reanimated corpses might actually look like. First things first, they're not zombies. The thing is, ever since we have started exhibiting
No
social
chance of
behavior,
seeing me
Helm
now.
guides my
corpse
path.
has been an object of disgust. We bury them, we burn them, or we leave them away from the food or living spaces. Why? Well, it's not like our ancestors knew enough about that material to understand the health risks of having corpses nearby, but they understood their own experiences. Leave a corpse out, and wild animals come close to feed on it. So, to keep your clan safe, you have to solve this issue. Either you put your dead away from civilization as a distraction for the beasts, or bury them so deep that wild animals won't dig them up or smell them easily. Leaving them somewhere near people also causes
Come,
bad
child,
smells,
there's no
annoying
need for
insects,
this.
and
Your
an
mother is with
increase
us.
in
She's
people
waiting
feeling
for
unwell.
you.
So keep the dead
You're lying.
away.
My
All of
mother
these
isn't
are
with you.
learnable
She's-
behaviors within just a few generations of existence and thought. And many
She
of
sent
these
us to
are
fetch you, my dear.
practices as well.
Take my hand
So
and you shall
health and
see.
safety isn't quite as modern and absurd
Warwick,
tool as you
Ellis,
might think.
watch the
So
sides.
zombies would make a really bad
Get away from her, you
for
witch!
any undead labor.
What is this?
Because of all of these issues, they spread disease, and wild animals will
Hey, you kiddo.
go to peace.
I need you
What
to
about
take this and
corpses
squeeze
that
it
have
real hard,
finished?
all right?
Well, clean bones
What's
are
going
more
on?
hygienic than
Who are
rotting
you?
flesh.
I'm Mira.
We have
I'm gonna
the
take you
added
somewhere
benefit that
safe.
it is hard
Just
to
take the
pick out
talisman,
identifying
alright?
features
Is this a
of
trick?
skeletons.
Are you trying to
Unless an
hurt me?
individual has died in a very specific
Step away
way,
from
or
the
is
child,
physically
elf.
deformed
She's
in some
ours.
manner, or
Half elf.
incredibly tall
And if you don't get
remarkable
out
in
of here,
that
things are
sense,
gonna get
we
really
can
ugly.
assume that
As ugly
most
as that
folks
witch and her tricks.
won't raise the same stink as they might if they see their grandmother reanimated as a zombie.
Get her
doing
before-
things. So, skeletons
Yes!
solve a
I knew you had it in you.
safety concerns.
Sorry, witch and witch
as long as the
lackeys.
necromancers
She's safe
can
now.
control them properly, and safeguards are put in
You
place in
didn't
case
think this
something
through,
goes wrong
did you?
with their magic.
Not
But
real
can
well.
we create a
But that's what magic
situation
is
where
for.
ethically we are justified?
Another one
The
eludes
corpse
us.
is a primary symbol of abjection. It stands
I suppose the
invariably
fault is as much mine as yours.
norms and
I was the one who trusted you,
acceptablenesses
after
of
all.
society.
Come
However
along.
much we are desensitized to representations of the skeleton in our media, the fact remains that the bones, the actual bones of a person, stir something within people. Be that a primal discomfort, or simple
it's you
thoughts that
again.
this is a bit macabre. Even if we clean our theoretical skeletons completely using fire, acid, or magic, the fact remains that they are still a corpse. And we are hardwired to reject the corpse from society. It is abject. So how could this be solved? Well, you could try bodies which seem less person.
I'm so happy you brought me with you. I never imagined that we would be doing such great things.
Meat or servitude may actually elicit different reactions as creatures seen as people. As long as your society is
I am pleased at the progress that this ill-conceived group has made. I had not thought such a thing possible.
Goblins and kobolds are interesting examples of this. Of course, the ethics of this are questionable at best, but it is true that in a fantasy world, the line gets far fuzzier when there are folks who can, talk to animals, and monsters who are more intelligent than seemingly humanoid people. Your best bet, if your magic system does allow for it, are animal corpses, as they do tend to elicit less disgust among people, and we have historically exploited them for labour forever. Although we have also historically exploited our fellow man, so that's not a great argument, and I'm pretty sure any nature-loving individuals, be they druids or otherwise, in your setting, death. A solid choice for solving both the health concerns and the squeamishness
Who just tips
concerns.
water barrels over
Is
in the
creating
street?
a shell, sealant, or other
Wait a tick.
disguise
Is-
for your
is that
undead
you?
labour
You look,
force. It may be a somewhat
older.
tired
Wait,
trope,
no.
but
Great.
acting like
You look
your
great.
undead labour force is actually animated scarecrows.
Good to
or
see
some
you too.
top-of-the-range
How funny to run into you here.
automaton, or
Some
simply
days
just
it's good to be a wild
conjured
mage,
workforce
you know?
using
But other
illusions.
days it's like
Might
herding
be
cats,
a
blind
solid
cats
way
who hate
to
each other.
cause the least harm by placing undead in and amongst your field workers. However, Kantian
You saw that?
ethics
And you
still
just
would not approve
stood there
of
and
the
watched?
attempt to deceive
Thanks a bunch.
mass group of people. This would be an
No
ethical
matter, I
ill.
guess.
So how could we
That was a red
possibly
wizard of
create
Thay
a
named
system
Lana.
where
That
undead
girl
are
was a
working
wild
out
mage
in the
like me.
open, or at least people are cognizant that undead are working out in the open without this
The hidden refuge.
abjection and
It's
disgust
a camp
taking hold,
I and some
without
other wild
the aid of
mages
the
set
general
up as a
populace.
sanctuary for people
The
like
only
us.
way I can see a standard fantasy society accepting this is really a combination of everything we have discussed.
At the moment,
far. Reanimation of
But I'd really
strictly
appreciate it if you could meet me at the Wild
cleared
Forest.
and prepared to be relatively sterile. Such a society would need to ensure
In the meantime,
that these
it looks like I'm
individuals'
hoofing it.
souls
Unless you
were
happen to have a
certainly
jade figurine of a horse in a
elsewhere,
saddle.
either through divination magics or
No chance of seeing me
The
now.
best leaders also follow.
At times drown and face first in copper water, bleed from every orifice, don't you know?
to avoid the
certain
bad
I'm out of
optics
sight.
of kindly
None will
grandmas
see me
being
now.
drafted into the undead horde. So, we are left with one obvious choice. Criminals. Throughout history, most human societies have held capital punishment as part of their
It shall be done,
systems.
and done
The
well.
moral failings of such a system were really first discussed properly in the Enlightenment, at least as best as we can tell. Meaning we have a lot of human history where the ritual punitive sacrifice of criminals' lives and limbs was standard and ethical by the standards of the time.
And I think to call this civilization, once
This
good humans,
acceptable ethical necromancy will not be killing for the purpose of creating undead workforces. Instead, perhaps we can exploit the fact that even alternative sentencing for crimes
I welcome you with outstretched
bars involves prison terms. Terms upon the fulfillment of which the individual is released out into the public. For serious offences, maybe these terms can stretch beyond the expected lifespan of an individual. For the most serious criminals, it may be the only ethical choice.
You are more than welcome in my sight.
Imprisoned for the remainder of for the safety of their fellow man. Again, the ethics of crime and punishment are a little beyond the scope of this video. So please, if you do find that interesting, get in the comments and tear me apart. As such, any individual who dies before a prison term is served may have the choice, or perhaps be forced by law, to spend the rest of his time as an undead labourer, working to repay the
Very well.
Even in modernity, we see a distinctive lack of sympathy for prisoners, which, though quite personally distressing, does mean that this would most likely be a popular policy measure. But we're not here to be popular, we are here to be ethical, and the attempt is to make an undead labour force at least ethically justifiable. And as such, co-opting the justice system, as long as the system is just,
I'm out of sight.
seems like a
None will see me now.
Bodies would in this system only be able to remain animated undead as long as they have left in their state.
No chance of seeing me now.
Perhaps that may be made permanent for some of the worst offenders. To assuage any doubts that these undead criminals may go back to their old
I'm certain I'm out of
ways,
sight.
they
None
would
will see
need
me
to be
now.
anonymised and fully covered in some more sightly trappings than a walking skeleton for sensitivity purposes and to avoid any of those unpleasant feelings
That was
of
it.
disgust
See you later.
immediately